What is up, YouTube? I'm excited to be back. I'm really excited for this video in general. My name is Oscar. Thank you for tuning in. This is where I talk about reality, awareness, consciousness, connecting with spirituality, and finding your true nature beyond the conventional. So today's topic, right? And before I tell you the topic, let me just put a disclaimer out there that I do not advise the use of drugs by any means. I'm only sharing my opinion and experience for entertainment / educational purposes in this video. So let's talk about the topic, which is my shroom experience on mushrooms, right? And so I'm going to be sharing with you the effects of how it felt to be on mushrooms, but also simultaneously what I learned about it myself, what I identified about the human, you could say, psychology, right? The parts of the true self, who we are, and really coming into our highest potential. How I learned to better integrate and to efficiently embody this higher potential as I was taking this plant medicine. So, at the beginning of my experience, let's start with phase 1. And in this video, you're gonna hear me talking about different phases because, just to let you know now, there's gonna be 4 phases in total, okay? So that's how I'm gonna be kind of narrating the story of my experience. So phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 being the end of the experience itself and telling you, recapping what I learned altogether. So let's start with phase 1. So phase 1, and of course prior to this phase, I was researching, right? I was researching who I was going to take the shrooms with, how I was going to get the mushrooms, and the dosage that I wanted to take. And already being on this conscious journey of self-discovery and finding the truth, I decided on an amount around 5 grams of mushrooms, which was not going to be too little and also not too much to overstimulate me where I can't learn and integrate what I intended, right? Because I always set my intention. And then also I set the intention while I took this experience beforehand to really discover portions of myself, to heal, to release, and to gain the most knowledge to then reach my highest potential. And then also, again, I picked the environment that I was going to be in and the people I was going to be around. So already having all of this assessed, right, all of this chosen, then I finally started the journey, okay? It was around, I would say, maybe 8 o'clock at night, and I had to work the next day. So you could already see how this was already kind of a bad, not bad, but just an irresponsible decision altogether. But I had been really excited and thirsty for the truth, where I was hungry to know more about myself and to reach a new altered state of consciousness on a different type of psychedelic, plant medicine. And so I went ahead and did it. I pulled a little YOLO moment, right? And so that day, phase 1 happened, and the effects started kicking in around 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And this is where it was very, I was becoming immersed with my environment, okay? So that's the way that I can describe it. I felt a deeper connection, right, with the walls around me. Everything started to get blurry, right? The hallucinogenic part of this plant medicine started to kick in. And I started to feel myself slowly but surely having to surrender to this new intensity. Because if you haven't taken psychedelics before, mushrooms or anything for that matter, I start to feel, and more than likely others will, feel the intensity because it's very intense. Remember, you're reaching and you're altering your state of consciousness and awareness on this hallucinogenic, on this psychedelic. It's activating portions of your brain that have not been activated before prior when you're sober, right? And then, so I was trying to get comfortable in this new state, right? Because it was different than all my other experiences. This was my first time taking mushrooms. So again, phase 1, I was becoming immersed in this new experience, in this new intensity. And I was really starting to already enter into a deep contemplation of who I was. But this was only phase 1, so it was very subtle. I wasn't completely going full throttle into who I was and my existence and reality. No, I was starting to see first what this psychedelic, what this plant medicine was communicating to me, right? I was trying to receive the messages, the downloads, the awareness that was specific to this plant. And so phase 2 started entering, right? And this is where I really started to feel what it was trying to convey to me, right? Really what I was experiencing, what the plant was showing me on this experience. And so, remember, the reason I say plant and what it was teaching me was because I do believe that the plant itself has a degree of consciousness. And then this consciousness is therefore the one that you are being exposed to while on this plant medicine, okay? So I was being exposed to this specific, unique consciousness, right? From the shrooms, from the mushrooms, and therefore experiencing what I was experiencing. So phase 2 came in, and this is where things start to get very interesting. And this is one of the main things I want to talk about in this video. One of the main things. And it's going to be about my self-identity, okay? This is where I started to learn the beginning of portions of myself that I was really ignoring, okay? And I was starting to feel and witness the separation and the combination of both my masculine and feminine side, masculine and feminine energies, left brain, right brain, okay? But more so how I identified as a man, as a male, okay? And so the way I viewed life from this male, from this guy perspective, started to dissolve. So imagine how that feels, right? If you're a girl watching this, or if you're a guy. The whole perception that you had, that you held dear to you your entire life, is starting to get peeled off, little by little. So I started to feel my eyes, the way I viewed the world, no longer from a male perspective, right? From the eyes of a man, right? It was being taken off that sticker of masculinity, right? And I was being kind of subjective, right? Not really subjective, I was kind of going into an objective state, to be honest. And it was of non-gender. And this is what really got me, and caught me off guard, to be honest, because I felt the overwhelming feeling of who am I without my masculinity? You see where I'm going here? So this self-identity, it was hard to let go because this is who I've been taught to be my entire life. I've been taught to be this guy, right, with these certain beliefs, with a certain path and purpose of life and what I want to go after in this lifetime. And so when you rip off my masculinity and I start to see the world from this all-embracing, right, all-loving perspective and viewpoint, it just, in a sense, it started to shatter me because I had to adapt. I had to adapt how I was feeling because I wasn't only viewing things from this non-gender state, right? Seeing from the eyes of a feminine, seeing from the eyes of a masculine, and completely loving and embracing every part of creation. So I already knew that this was a state of consciousness in alignment with a higher portion of myself, a higher portion of creation itself, right? At a higher level of consciousness, where I was literally viewing things as the creator, okay? Every single thing I knew that it was just a part of creation, and therefore it deserved non-judgment. But what it did deserve was all acceptance. So I was all accepting, all embracing, and all loving. And it was crazy because I started to see how things were rewiring within myself. Now, after feeling uncomfortable for, I would say 30 to almost an hour into this phase 2, right? Things were starting to become comfortable now. I was starting to accept and realize that this is what I had been asking for. Prior to this psychedelic experience, right, I was having trouble being all loving and all embracing. I was being very judgmental. So what did this do? What did this plant teach me along the way, along the journey? It was to learn to accept and to embody this level of consciousness all the time. And I didn't know it was possible in this current moment. I didn't know it was possible, but I was now experiencing it to the fullest degree. So everything that I was witnessing, the people I was with, that's the viewpoint that I had. And then, again, I started to become comfortable with this notion of accepting all things, me having no gender, and the fact that I also coming to the conclusion that how flexible are we really when it comes to viewing the world, accepting the world, and being ourselves. That's another thing. my masculinity was ripped away from me, so was portions of my ego, portions of my pride, which is also in connection with the ego, but all those parts of myself that didn't help me be more authentic or transparent to the world and to others, now was being ripped away. So I was now being able to see how I could fully express myself how I wanted to, spontaneously and effortlessly in every given moment. That is the lesson that I was so grateful to learn in phase 2 of this experience. So now, let's move on to phase 3, okay? Phase 3 now, things again were in this, and again, phase 3, I want to just let you guys know so you guys can keep on track, you know, where I am in the trip. It was already about 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe almost getting to 2, right? That was kind of the time frame. And so, in phase 3, this is when things started to get kind of turn around. Things were kind of going in my direction. Now it was being accepted. I was surrendering to this intensity, to this new level of consciousness. But now this is where things took a turn. Because now the people I was with, I ended up going to a park, right? We wanted to be in nature and just chill. And then while going to this park, I was already reevaluating, reassessing this new level of consciousness. I was walking around, I was saying, man, I could get used to this. I could get used to seeing the world in this way, accepting all others, no longer judging people, and now I have a more unbiased approach as I go into my YouTube career, right? And teach people and spread this knowledge, spread the wisdom that I've learned, that I've gained from this state of non-gender, from this state of all-encompassing creation, right? Of everything. Being connected and being one, instead of my viewpoint as a man and this and this and that, right? But then I started to notice that the people I was with started to smoke cannabis, weed, right? And this kind of triggered something within me, a belief that I've created, right, in the past. And I think that it's in alignment with, you know, a higher portion of myself that I felt. It's this gut feeling of, if they start smoking it, don't you smoke it, okay? And I start to feel not only myself say that, but the psychedelic, the shrooms itself, was communicating that to me. I was getting kind of these messages and this feeling, and you could say a small voice in my head that was telling me, follow your integrity, right? And then I remember that also, that before I took this experience, before I went on this journey, that I told myself I was only going to focus on learning from this plant itself. I had already done my work, I had already done my research, right, on myself about consciousness with cannabis. So focus this time only on shrooms. Don't mix and match, okay? Respect this plant medicine for what it's teaching you itself in its own unique way. Don't combine and bring in another person, right, that wasn't invited to the party, so to speak, right? And so we walk into the park and they spark up the joint. And here I am, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, man, should I follow my integrity? But a part of me, right, my ego was starting to creep in. The darker portions of myself were starting to creep in, right? And we're like, come on, man, just take a hit or two. So, obviously you can tell by my attitude throughout the video what happened. I ended up taking a couple puffs. I went against my own integrity, against my own promise with myself. And I took the puffs. And this is when things kind of, like I said, it was a tipping point. It completely changed the experience that I had. Now I was under, before it all happened, I was chilling, everything was going good as planned. I was like, man, this isn't so bad. You know, I just took 2 hits, no harm, no foul. But then right as I started to take on that attitude of a little bit of sarcasm of like, oh yeah, you can get away with stuff, right? That's when the plan, I heard it tell me, I told you, you shouldn't have taken it. And things started to just unravel at enormous rates, at enormous speeds. The consciousness, the degree of consciousness that I was now entering was like insane. And this was phase 3. It was the climax of the experience. If you haven't taken psychedelics before, there's going to be many climaxes throughout your experience. And this was the climax experience. And I had taken psychedelic puffs of joints at this time. Because if you don't know, if you are cleansed, if you are have cleansed the calcification, right, in your third eye region, right, if you have done the inner work in the personal development, right, and so you can see with more of your extrasensory perception, the cannabis actually affects you, okay? It's almost like a psychedelic. It's a psychoactive. So imagine that. Both of those combined, my area of perception, my third eye, was going haywire. Okay, and I was entering this new level of consciousness where I couldn't handle, or I thought I couldn't handle at that moment, right? Because I was feeling guilty. But you see how these different parts of myself that I was ignoring, that I kind of separated from what I was really striving for in this experience, what happened? So all this took a turn only because I didn't follow my integrity. I wasn't being honest with myself, I was being irresponsible, and I was being guilty. So all those feelings kind of came up, and I wasn't able to surrender happily and lovingly to the experience. So I went down a downward spiral, and I started to feel myself out of control. And the majority of my life, I've always been in control of the situations and stuff. But a huge part of consciousness, another lesson that I learned, was that surrender and being comfortable in the uncomfortable, in the unknown, when you don't know what's going to happen, is an important part of evolving into your highest potential. Because that's when you get to see the greater power and the greater force and intelligence at hand. Why you came here, and the overall bigger picture of what you did, what it is you're learning. Okay? So I started to feel myself out of control. I don't know what to do. And then I started to worry about work the next day. I had to go to work like in 7 hours. How was I gonna go to work after experiencing such a freaking experience? After all this intensity, I'm gonna be exhausted. How can I show up to work like that? That's crazy. And then I started to remember, how am I gonna get to work to begin with if I lose my car keys after I can't even handle what I'm perceiving? Because already at this point, guys, I couldn't even perceive what was in front of me, okay? I was looking at the floor and I was seeing something else. I was seeing myself in another reality, okay? And so I was losing control. I wasn't in control of anything. I didn't want to lose anything. My phone, what time was it? So it was this huge loop of negative, doubtful thoughts, okay? Negative loop of doubtful thoughts, of thoughts that weren't gonna get me anywhere. And so that was not contributing to a good trip, to a good experience. So what ended up happening, right, which was what happens to a lot of people that take shrooms and sometimes aren't able to surrender, if you want to do the research, is that I went into a thought loop. That whole negative loop that I had, right? Imagine getting stuck. You know when the movie, when you're playing something on Netflix, right? And your internet connection goes bad, and so you see a little ring going like this, non-stop, and you're like, it's buffering. And you're like, man, when is this shit gonna play, right? Well, that's what I was experiencing. Oscar's movie of reality, Oscar's movie of life, was on buffer status. So just imagine how uncomfortable I was at the beginning, entering that state of dum, 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 and I couldn't get out. And it was through me having this attitude of Tao, of fear, right? Of cowardice in a sense, right? Not being able to, you know, man up and say, okay, I'm gonna surrender and I'm just gonna accept it. No, I wanted to get out of it, and therefore I was fighting against it. I had a lot of resistance to this experience, and then I kept on getting stuck over and over again, to the point where a portion of my consciousness completely left. It left. That portion of consciousness that I had used to find the truth and to really love all things left. It went into another portion of creation. So this is the first time in phase 3 when I learned how you are able to, that you're everywhere, okay? That I am everything, and that I can be simultaneously in many different states of consciousness, and that I can perceive things at phenomenal rates, okay? So this is something else that I want to share with you. The fact that this is the first time that I had experienced that I could actually be one place, suffering, and then another portion of myself can be somewhere else, learning something about creation, about consciousness, right? About evolution. And that experience was very intense because one portion of myself was in this thought loop of buffering and of being stuck, not knowing where to go, not being in control, and then a part of myself had left. And I was now in this new state of like experiencing reality itself, the whole entire world come into form, but through my own experience, okay? So all the behaviors, all the lies, all the bad intentions, all the lessons that I learned throughout my life, all the identifications that I made within myself, all the parts of myself that I had hidden, that I had compartmentalized, right? Within my brain, within my being, all those things start to get let out. Like before it was a box, now I had the key, I opened that box, the Pandora's box, right? And everything got set out in the open. So I experienced a complete reality of every single facet of my being in front of me. I got to watch it out. All my animalistic, bad intentions, bad behaviors, indulgences in the physical material world, like sex, drugs, eating too much, all those things had its own reality that I was watching on a movie screen. And I was able to see myself do all these things, and also other situations similar to the ones I was doing. I was learning from that. And then again, another movie played on another screen, and I started to watch all the irresponsibility, all the guilt that I felt in my entire life, again, play on a screen. And this other, you could say, dimension of consciousness that I was experiencing simultaneously. And so all this was happening. I was getting different screens of different parts of myself, and they were all being revealed to me in the open. And up until a point of exhaustion, to be honest. And you're gonna say why I use the word exhaustion as I move on to phase 4. Okay, so all those parts of myself that I was hiding, that was contributing to my lack of self-expression and being honest and authentic, was all being revealed in the open, so that I can be this new version, be this new person. All those belief systems that I had trouble believing, that I knew were true, got grounded within me, got reconfigured, reshaped, okay? And it's as if I was cleansing. It was a cleansing, but a forceful cleanse that was in alignment with that decision that I thought was bad, but was actually going to teach me something more about who I am and what I'm capable of. So that was phase 3, treacherous phase, right? And now I want to move on to phase 4. So again, your perception is unlimited, okay? And everything in your life is perception. So depending on your state of consciousness, is gonna dictate, right? Is gonna show you what it is you are gonna now be perceiving once you reach a new state of consciousness, okay? If you're at a lower state of consciousness, you're going to perceive the world at a lower state of consciousness, right? That's going to be your level of perception. So your perception is going to be very limited. As you start to increase your levels of consciousness, as you do the personal development, you start to see how your perception, the clarity within your environment, the connection with all things starts to become enhanced. Because now you've reached a new level of perception, a new level of consciousness and awareness, right? So I just wanted to say that, put that out there. And now moving on to phase 4. This was the phase of, you could say, the Dark Knight, right? It's like that Batman movie, The Rise of the Dark Knight, right? That was literally how I was feeling. And why do I say that? And it's because, like I said, all parts of myself were put out in the open. And also, physically what was happening was that throughout this whole experience of me being out of control, the people that I was with, and they were actually taking the shrooms as well. So they ended up calling the cops, right? Because I was going out of control and walking on the streets and whatnot. But again, remember, I wasn't in control of my body. I was in a different state of consciousness while my body was being controlled by this, state. So I want you to put that into perspective to see really what we can attain. So the cops came, they started to evaluate the situation, they started to take notes and ask us, what are you okay, do you feel like hurting anybody? All these questions about myself that I knew weren't true, right? And that I was still not even in connection, completely in control with what was happening with me. I was completely, like, not in control of my situation. So into phase 4, when the cops arrived, and already, as things started to lead up to me going home and whatever, that portion of my consciousness that I was experiencing, those slates of watching parts of myself that I ignored, that I had divided, were now starting to come back, but cleansed. Key point. All those portions of myself that I was watching were already cleansed, and they were now coming back into my life. So they started to come into my physical body again. I was finally in control. I was immersed in this material, three-dimensional reality, and I was like, okay, finally, I'm back. But it was different. I was again in that state of non-gender, and of watching the people in front of me from this heightened level of awareness. So the people that I was watching, it looked like a dream. I literally felt like I was just coming into a dream. I was becoming conscious, and that everyone was imaginary characters. So just imagine how I felt. I felt like each person was an illusion. That I could literally control my external environment, and that I had to accept it, and that I had to love it. So at this point, I'm a little confused, because I said, if I can control my environment, and if all these people are illusory, right, and are just parts of my perception, then why am I not in control? Why am I not able to change the situation and erase it? But it's okay, because this is things that I had to learn. The questions that they were asking me, they were reaffirming all the things that I had previously learned through that experience that kind of, in a sense, traumatized me, right? For lack of a better word. That really hit me in the heart, where in the core of my being, which shattered my previous reality, previous self-identity, version of myself, who I thought I was, and now was showing me to a new version of who I can be permanently. So they were asking me questions like, what's your mental state? Are you okay? Do you want to hurt people? And my answer would always be, no, I love all things. You know, I'm just enjoying things. You know, we're all one. All these types of answers, right? Because I was still integrating this portion of myself, which is going to be all embracing and all loving. So then finally I move on to cleaning up this mess. The cops leave, and now I go into, you know, my house. I go over to my house, and I start to see how socially everyone that I was encountering, the cops and everything, they were all very, remember, I'm proceeding from a higher level of consciousness on this experience, on this psychedelic, and I'm watching people from a very sober state of consciousness, three-dimensional level of consciousness. So I'm watching that, I'm evaluating that they look like programs. They actually look like programs, that they're not actually thinking for themselves, that they're literally following the system step by step. And I don't say this to go, oh my God, F the system, right? The system's bad. No, I only say that because when you start to reach a certain level of consciousness, right? You start to watch your outside environment. You start to watch other people that are not about the path of self-discovery, that are not interested in their own conscious evolution. And you start to question to yourself, why aren't they thinking to themselves? Why aren't they trying to become their best version and find out about the truth, about reality? Why are they settling for something that has been taught to them that is not actually the truth? So these are thoughts that started to happen within me, that started to become very strong, that I started to become very passionate about, because I started to see how people are just running these programs within their subconscious mind. They're just acting out their daily lives. But in reality, from a higher perspective, they're not really choosing. Right? They're not living for themselves. They're not being free-spirited. They're not living authentically. They still have many boundaries and many portions of themselves, right? That they are living through. That is not in alignment with that kind of higher portion, higher level of intelligence that they have access to. But first, they need to break free from it. They need to break free from the programs, that old paradigm, and that habitual way of thinking and doing things. So, I realized that, and as I was going home, as I got dropped off from my friends after not, you know, being in control the entire night, being completely shocked about what I've experienced, what I felt actually. Remember, the important thing is what you feel, because once you feel something, that becomes already stored within your whole being. You're able to actually experience that to the fullest degree, and not only think it, but actually feel it. You're embodying it now. So I went back to my house, and I was questioning life. I was like, what am I doing with my life? Who am I? And because remember, I just gotten shattered. The Oscar that I knew had been completely destroyed. And essentially, after, you know, even having tears come out of my eyes because I was so confused and so hurt by the fact that I can't even recognize myself in the mirror anymore, I started to almost classify myself with mental disorders. Oscar, you have, I don't know, schizophrenia or some shit, right? I was telling myself these things. Oscar, you're crazy. You can't do it. You can't do this. I was starting to go down that negative thought loop again. But you see, because it was out of fear and out of integrating these higher portions of myself, the true self, and this is key, that I learned in the last phase that I really want to share with you, is the fact that I started to almost classify myself so physically about how I was feeling, about how I was identifying with myself at a very third-dimensional level, that I almost forgot about my true purpose, my true path, what I actually had been learning sober, right? I had forgotten all about that only because I had gotten hurt by my circumstances. I was becoming circumstantially focused on what I was experiencing. I was being subjective to my experience and not objective and learning from what I had learned, right? Through that experience of taking psychedelics, taking mushrooms. So you see what was happening here? That all happened because I was so physically focused. And I was kind of falling away from what I truly believe. So as I started to go down that, tunnel again of darkness, boom, a spark shined, a spark flew from within me, and it told me, and I realized, hey, don't forget who you are. Don't forget that tomorrow is a new day, and tomorrow you wake up new. Tomorrow you are reborn. Tomorrow you are healed. So I started to take on this new fresh perspective, right? Of remembrance, of wait a second, I almost went down this spiral loop of physical oriented beliefs when I know that I am infinite multidimensional spiritual being that is much more complex than just classifying myself with certain mental disorders. That there's much more going on, there's many more puzzle pieces, right, to connect. So I then I went to sleep, I woke up the next day, and that's exactly what happened. I now reintegrated or started to reintegrate all the things that I learned. I remembered everything, but now that sober portion of myself, that consciousness, was now combining, was intertwining with all that I had learned, was now forming a new self-identity, a new self. So it took some time. I was a little quiet for about a couple days, and I didn't know how to speak, I didn't know how to behave, because I felt so free. Before I had already felt kind of free, right? But this time, it made me feel free to the point of, I don't know who I want to be now. Who can I be now after feeling so free, right? After knowing that I could be anybody that I want. That it doesn't matter what I say, what I do, but as long as I have these main fundamental ideals within me, being unbiased, being all-embracing and all-loving, and being able to connect the dots for everybody, not only scientifically, logically, but also psychologically and spiritually. That I can do all of that, and as long as I have those three, my ego can't get in the way, and I can give you the most, and I can share the most transparent truth with all those who watch my YouTube channel, with all the people that I encounter. I can send them the unconditional love without conditions. You understand where I'm coming from now? So all of this started to kind of come together, and I started to finally see how I want to behave now in life. And things again started to radically change within my external environment, how I was behaving, how I was doing things. And just like I said, I was reborn. I re-emerged from the ashes, right? That dark night that had fallen, and all my darkness was out in the open. I didn't have a problem with it. I knew all the things, and I had forgiven myself. I had accepted what happened, and now I had accepted what is and what will be, all at once. So, let's wrap up the video, okay? I hope you understood how the effects of mushrooms can affect your consciousness, how you can use it to spiritually evolve, to reintegrate new beliefs, to reshape or reconfigure who you think you are, and then make it into an alignment with your highest portion of yourself. The true self, the all-pervading self and consciousness that we have access to. And I want you to ask yourselves the questions, right? Of, if you choose to take this route in your life, what will you intend to get out of it? Are there portions of yourself that you are not ready to deal with, that maybe you don't want to look at? And realize that that can be ripped away from you. Who you thought you were is just kind of a, I hate to use the word program, right? But it's literally an illusion. Who you think you are, and that you can literally be someone else the next day. Alright? And that you have access to all these portions of self, quote unquote, because the self is every self. So I hope this assisted you on your path. I hope this inspired you, maybe allowed you to experience and kind of visualize what I was going through to attain a new, fresh perspective on life, to add on to your own journey, and that you have light and dark within you that will come up at any time, but at the end of the day, the light and darkness still coexist harmoniously within you if you choose to integrate and balance it in that way. But again, personal development is key. Going on this conscious journey, finding the truth, staying hungry, becoming unbiased when you learn all these things. And you're gonna see why I say that, why it's so important, because I'm really excited to make the next video as well, which I'm gonna talk about how who we are is always being filtered from within us. Everything is internalized. So when you take the right approach, now when people hear you, when you talk, when you speak, when you do things, it's coming from the space of all embracing, all loving, unbiased beingness. So if you're excited for that, stay tuned for the next video, and hope you enjoyed this one. Leave me a like, comment what you think about this video. Have you ever tried any psychedelic, right? And hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget, let's evolve.